My name is Rachel, and if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you'll understand what I went through. From the outside, people thought we were the perfect family: a hard-working father, a mother who kept everything in order, 3 children who seemed happy, neighbors admired us, teachers praised my parents. But behind the walls of our home, the truth was very different. Love wasn't shared equally. It was given like a rare gift, and I was never the one to receive it. Daniel, my older brother, was everything to my parents. He could break rules, skip chores, even talk back, and they would still look at him with pride. Emily, my younger sister, was the little angel. All she had to do was cry, and the whole house would run to comfort her. And then there was me, the forgotten one, the one who only existed when something needed to be done. On my 9th birthday, I woke up hopeful. Maybe this year they would remember me. Maybe this year I would finally feel special. I ran downstairs, expecting at least a cake or a hug. Instead, I found my parents busy decorating the living room. For a moment, my heart lit up, until I realized the decorations weren't for me. They had invited neighbors to celebrate Daniel because his soccer team had won a game. Not a championship, just one game. The whole house was filled with laughter, claps, and pride for him. And me? I stood in the corner, clutching a little card I had made for myself. On it, I had written, "Happy birthday, Rachel." No one noticed. No one remembered. That night, I sat alone in my room with a single cupcake I had saved. I lit a candle, sang to myself quietly, and blew it out, pretending it was enough. School became my escape. I thought if I achieved something great, maybe my parents would finally look at me the way they looked at Daniel and Emily. In 4th grade, I won the spelling bee. I rushed home with the trophy in my hands, excited, desperate for someone to be proud of me. "Mom! Dad! Look! I won!" I said. My father didn't even glance up from his newspaper. "That's nice, Rachel," he muttered, before turning to ask Daniel about his practice. My mother barely smiled before focusing back on Emily's coloring book. The trophy slipped from my hands when Daniel called me a nerd and knocked it over. The shiny golden top bent out of shape, and no one scolded him. I picked it up, polished it myself, and placed it on my nightstand. To me, it was proof that I mattered, even if no one else thought so. One summer, I was riding my bike when I hit a rock and crashed. My knee bled as I limped back home, crying, hoping someone would help me. "Mom, I fell." "It hurts," I sobbed. She looked at me for a second, then turned back to Emily, who was upset over a broken crayon. "Wash it off, Rachel. You're tough," she said, brushing me aside. I stood there, blood dripping down my leg, while Emily's crayon was treated like a tragedy. A year later, when Daniel sprained his ankle, the entire house turned into a hospital. My mother carried him to the couch. My father hovered over him. Emily brought him snacks. He was treated like a hero. That was when it hit me. Pain only mattered in my family if it wasn't mine. So I found my own refuge. The library became my safe place. I spent hours there, lost in stories where forgotten girls grew into extraordinary women, where the overlooked became the strongest of all. Those books gave me hope. They whispered to me that maybe, one day, I would rise too. At night, lying in bed, I would stare at the ceiling and whisper to the darkness, "Do they love me? Do they even see me?" The silence was always my answer. But somewhere inside, a small voice began to grow. A voice that told me, if no one else was going to love me, I would have to learn to love myself. If no one else was going to believe in me, I would have to believe in myself. That was my childhood. A childhood of being forgotten, overlooked, and left in the shadows. But even then, without realizing it, I was slowly becoming stronger, strong enough to face what was coming next. As I grew older, the gap between me and the rest of my family only widened. By the time I entered my teenage years, I had already accepted that I wasn't the favorite child, or even a child worth noticing. But deep inside, there was still a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, things would change. High school was supposed to be a fresh start. I remember walking into the building on the first day, clutching my books tightly, telling myself that here I could become someone different. Here, no one knew me as the forgotten middle child. Here, maybe I could belong. I threw myself into studying, joining clubs, and even trying out for choir. For the first time, I felt a small spark of recognition from others. Teachers praised my essays, friends admired how hard I worked. But at home, none of it mattered. Every report card with straight A's, every certificate, every accomplishment. I would place them on the kitchen table, waiting for my parents' reaction. They would glance at it, murmur, "Good job," and then turn back to Daniel's sports updates or Emily's art projects. One day, when I was 15, I came home with an award for writing. It wasn't just a school award, it was statewide. I was glowing with pride, holding that plaque like it was my lifeline. I walked into the living room, where my parents were already celebrating Emily's art piece being chosen for display at school. The room was filled with snacks, laughter, and clapping. I stood there quietly, with my plaque in hand. No one even looked at it. No one asked me what I had won. I slipped away to my room, set the plaque on my desk, and for the first time, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt a strange fire in my chest. A thought formed in my mind. If they won't see me now, one day they'll have no choice but to see me. But the hardest lesson of my teenage years wasn't about neglect. It was about betrayal. I had a best friend named Claire. She was the only one who knew how broken I felt at home. We spent hours talking about dreams, about leaving town, about building a life where we could be free. I trusted her with every secret, every tear, every fragile piece of myself. For once, I felt seen. For once, I believed someone cared. And then, it all came crashing down. I discovered that Claire had been sharing my secrets with others at school. She told them how my family ignored me, how I cried in the library, how desperate I was for love. Suddenly, whispers followed me in the hallways. Poor Rachel. The unwanted daughter. The invisible one. My private pain had become entertainment for others. I confronted her, my voice shaking, asking why she would do that to me. She looked at me coldly and said, "Because it's pathetic, Rachel. You're pathetic. Maybe now you'll realize no one wants to hear your sob stories." And just like that, the one person I thought I could trust vanished from my life, leaving me with nothing but shame and anger. That betrayal changed me. It taught me that not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. It taught me that some people enjoy your pain because it makes them feel stronger. And it taught me that I could no longer afford to hand my heart to anyone who hadn't earned it. But even in the middle of that darkness, I held on to my dreams. I wanted a different life. I wanted to build something beyond the walls of that house that had always suffocated me. So I studied harder than ever. I worked late into the night, reading, writing, and pushing myself. While Daniel partied and Emily was showered with attention, I built a quiet determination inside me. I knew I couldn't change my family. I knew I couldn't undo the betrayal. But I also knew this. One day, I would rise so high that the people who ignored me, doubted me, and betrayed me would regret ever doing so. That spark of determination was the beginning of my strength. And soon, I would get the chance to prove it, not just to them, but to myself. By the time I turned 18, I had made myself a silent promise. I would escape that house. I would no longer live in the shadows of Daniel and Emily. I would no longer beg for scraps of attention from parents who never saw me. When the college acceptance letter arrived, I clutched it with trembling hands. I had earned a full scholarship, something my family hadn't expected, maybe hadn't even believed I was capable of. For the first time, I felt like the world had opened a door just for me. I remember the day I told my parents. I sat at the dinner table, my heart pounding, and announced, "I got in. They gave me a scholarship. I'll be leaving this fall." I waited, hoping for at least a smile, some acknowledgement that I had achieved something huge. But my father only nodded and said, That's good, Rachel. But remember, don't forget where you came from. My mother added, don't get carried away. We still need to think about Emily's future. She might need more support than you. And just like that, the moment I had dreamed of felt smaller. Still, I refused to let their indifference dull my joy. I packed my bags with more determination than belongings and left for college, carrying with me the quiet vow that I would never come back the same. College was like stepping into a new world. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten child. I was Rachel, the hardworking student, the writer, the girl who people respected for her ideas. Professors noticed me, classmates valued me, and slowly the hole inside me began to fill. I spent countless nights in the library, not because I was running away from home this time, but because I was running toward my future. I poured myself into my studies, writing essays that won competitions, speaking in debates, and slowly building a name for myself. Every time someone clapped for me, every time someone praised my work, I felt a piece of my broken childhood begin to heal. And yet, deep inside, there was always that echo, that voice that whispered, they never believed in you. They never cared. One day, they'll regret it. That thought became the fuel that kept me going when things got hard. In my second year, I started working part-time at a publishing house. At first, I was just a student intern, sorting papers, fetching coffee, staying late when no one else would. But I observed, I listened, and I learned. My dedication caught the eye of one of the senior editors. He gave me a chance to help edit an upcoming novel. I worked day and night, pouring all my effort into it, and when the book became a success, he told me, Rachel, you have a gift. Don't waste it. For the first time, someone in authority believed in me, not because they had to, but because I had earned it. That validation was worth more than any approval my parents had ever withheld. By the time I graduated, I had already published my first short story. It didn't make me rich, but it made me visible. People knew my name. People respected my work. And when I stood on that stage, holding my diploma, the applause echoing around me, I couldn't help but think of all the times I had sat in my bedroom, asking if I even mattered. Yes, I mattered, more than they had ever allowed me to believe. I went on to build a career in writing, slowly climbing from small articles to bigger projects. The same girl who once whispered to herself in the dark was now standing on stages, speaking to audiences who listened closely to every word. And though I smiled, though I carried myself with pride, a part of me was always waiting for the moment when my family would see who I had become. Because success felt good, but revenge was still waiting quietly in my heart. The first taste of it came unexpectedly. One evening, years later, my mother called me. Her voice was softer than I remembered. She said, Rachel, your father and I were talking. We're so proud of you. For a moment, I almost believed it, until she added, we were hoping you could help Emily with some connections. She's struggling with her career. Maybe you could put in a word for her? There it was. The truth. They hadn't called to celebrate me. They had called because they needed something. I listened in silence, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and strange satisfaction. For years they had ignored me. For years I had begged for their love. And now, suddenly, they needed me. I didn't say no. I didn't explode. I simply said, I'll think about it, and hung up. But when I put the phone down, I smiled for the first time. Not out of joy, but out of power. For the first time in my life, the balance had shifted. They were no longer above me. They were no longer the ones with control. And that, I realized, was only the beginning. Years passed, and with each one, I built myself higher than I ever thought possible. I bought my first apartment, a quiet little place with shelves overflowing with books and windows that welcomed the morning sun. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, and it felt like freedom. I had carved out a life that belonged to me, no longer defined by neglect, no longer shaped by the shadows of Daniel and Emily. My career was flourishing. My second book had just been released, gaining attention in circles I never imagined entering. Interviews, speaking engagements, invitations. I was living the life I had once only dreamed of in those long nights as a forgotten child. And yet, every victory carried with it the same whisper. Now they will see you, Rachel. Now they'll regret it. That moment came sooner than I expected. One evening, as I was reviewing notes for a lecture, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something inside told me to answer. On the other end, it was my father. His voice was older, weaker than I remembered, but still carried the same authority he had always wielded over me. Rachel, he said slowly, we need to talk. Those words, so simple, made my chest tighten. After years of silence, now they wanted to talk. I agreed to meet them, though part of me wanted to slam the door on the past forever. When I walked into my childhood home, the air felt heavy, unchanged. The same worn-out furniture, the same smell of old wood and my mother's cooking, the same walls that had once echoed with my silence. My mother greeted me with a smile that felt forced. Daniel was there, looking worn and bitter, his athletic glory long faded. Emily sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Her once bright spark dimmed. For a moment, no one spoke, and then my father cleared his throat. Rachel, he said, we know we weren't the best parents, but times are hard now. Daniel's business failed. Emily hasn't found steady work, and we thought, maybe you could help us. You've done so well for yourself. I sat there, staring at them. The family who had forgotten my birthdays, dismissed my achievements, ignored my pain, now sitting before me, asking for help. A part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to cry. But what I felt most was a sharp, cold satisfaction. My mother leaned forward. We're proud of you, Rachel. Truly. We just didn't realize back then how much you were capable of. But now, we see it, and we need you. Their words cut deep, not because they hurt, but because I knew they weren't about love. They were about survival. They didn't come to me because they finally understood my worth. They came because I had something they wanted. I thought back to all the nights I had spent alone, whispering to myself in the dark, asking if they loved me. The answer had always been silence. And now, here they were, speaking words I had once begged for, but they rang hollow. I took a deep breath and said, do you remember my 9th birthday? Do you remember the spelling bee? Do you remember when I came home bleeding and no one cared? They shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances, but said nothing. Of course you don't, I continued, because back then I didn't matter. But now, suddenly, I matter. Because you need me. The room grew still. My father tried to protest, but I held up my hand. For the first time, they fell silent when I spoke. You taught me that love in this family was conditional, that I had to fight for every shred of recognition. But I stopped fighting long ago. I built a life without you, and I won't let you take that from me. My voice was calm, steady, but inside, my heart was pounding. Years of pain, years of silence, years of being invisible, all pouring out in those words. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Rachel, please. We didn't mean. But I cut her off. No, you did mean it, and I lived with it, but I don't need your apologies now. I don't need your pride. I don't need your approval. What I needed, you couldn't give me when it mattered most, and I will never forget that. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, muttering that I was being selfish, that family should stick together. I looked at him, the golden child who had once knocked my trophy to the ground, and I said, family should care when it counts, not just when they're desperate. I stood up, my hands trembling but my spine straight. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible child in that house. I was the one holding all the power. As I walked out the door, I didn't look back. I knew they were watching me, perhaps even regretting the years they had wasted. But their regret was theirs to carry, not mine. For me, that moment wasn't just confrontation, it was closure. The girl who once whispered into the dark, asking if she mattered, had finally found her answer. I mattered to myself, and that was enough. Walking out of that house was like walking out of a cage I hadn't realized I was still trapped in. The air outside felt lighter, sharper, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. But freedom wasn't the only thing I carried with me that night. I carried their regret too. I had seen it in their eyes, in the way my mother's tears fell, in the way my father's voice cracked, in the way Daniel's pride burned as I refused to bend. They had lost control over me, and they knew it. In the months that followed, I focused on myself more than ever. My third book became a bestseller, not just in my country, but overseas. Invitations came from places I had once only dreamed of: London, New York, Paris. Audiences packed halls to hear my words, the words they once ignored, the voice they once silenced. Each clap, each cheer, each standing ovation was not just for me. It was for the little girl who had once sung happy birthday to herself in a dark bedroom. Success gave me power, and with power came the chance to show them what they had thrown away. It happened one evening at an award ceremony. I had been nominated for Writer of the Year, a recognition so prestigious that the entire literary world paid attention. I walked into the grand hall, dressed in a gown that shimmered under the lights, my name echoing on the lips of strangers who admired me. As I took my seat, I noticed familiar faces in the audience: my parents, Daniel, and Emily. They hadn't been invited by me. They had come because they finally wanted to claim me, to stand by my side, to bask in my light after years of leaving me in the dark. When my name was called as the winner, I rose to my feet, applause filling the room. I walked to the stage, my heart steady, my head held high. As I stood at the microphone, the weight of my entire life pressed against me: the neglect, the betrayal, the loneliness, the pain, and then the strength, the resilience, the victories. I began my speech. When I was a child, I used to wonder if I mattered. I used to sit in silence, whispering into the dark, asking if anyone saw me. The answer was always no. For years, I believed I was invisible, forgotten, unworthy. But tonight, as I stand here, I realize that I was never invisible. I was simply waiting to grow into the person I was meant to be. The room was silent, hanging on to every word. I glanced at my family in the crowd. My mother's hands were clasped tightly, my father's jaw tense, Daniel shifting uncomfortably, and I continued, my voice firm. To anyone who has ever been overlooked, ignored, or made to feel like they weren't enough, I want you to know this: you are enough. You don't need anyone's permission to shine. You don't need anyone's approval to rise. The people who fail to see your worth today will be the same people who regret it tomorrow. The audience erupted in applause, but I didn't smile at my family. I didn't need to, because in that moment, the revenge was complete. They had to sit there, surrounded by strangers who celebrated me, knowing they had been the ones to throw away what others valued so deeply. After the ceremony, they tried to approach me. My mother's voice shook as she said, "Rachel, we're so proud of you. We always knew." But I stopped her gently. "No," I said. "You didn't know, you didn't care, and that's okay, because I no longer need you to." I turned and walked away, cameras flashing, fans calling my name, people wanting my autograph. For the first time, my family wasn't the center of my world. I was. And that was the ultimate revenge. Not anger, not shouting, not hatred. The revenge was my rise. The revenge was their regret. The revenge was proving, without a doubt, that I had become everything they said I could never be. Today, when I look back, I don't feel bitterness anymore. I feel strength, because every wound they gave me became a scar that shaped me. Every tear I cried became water for the seed of resilience that grew inside me. And every time they ignored me, They unknowingly pushed me toward a future brighter than they could ever imagine. I am Rachel, the forgotten child, the invisible girl, the unwanted daughter. And I am also Rachel, the woman who rose stronger, who found her voice, who built a life so powerful that the world had no choice but to see her. And now, when I whisper into the dark, the answer is no longer silence. The answer is applause.